Welcome to Mindful and Intentional, brought to you by Identity. When we started Identity, we set out to simplify the internet, to optimize the experience for focus and productivity, while removing much of the clutter and distraction. With this podcast, however, we're thinking about optimization more broadly. In other words, how do we optimize our lives for the things that truly matter to us? It's our hope that by having conversations with people that seem to be living mindful and intentional lives, that we might learn something important in the process. Perhaps you will too. Leslie, I appreciate you making the time, sir. Welcome to the show.
Man, like I said, thank you for the invite, and it's my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. No, I'm very, very much looking forward to it. You are based quite literally on the opposite side of the planet. How
That's
are
right.
things looking in Sydney, Australia?
Yeah, look, whenever anyone asks that, in terms of for context of listeners, it's late 2020, and whenever people ask me, how things are looking in this part of the world, honestly, it's like nothing has happened. Other than the inclusion of some face masks and things like this, everything seems to be pretty much normal. We last night we just had quite a large or significant sports event, like a rugby league match, that the stadium was full. In this was not in Sydney, but in Brisbane, Australia. But still, for me to see that, it was quite shocking. But yeah, just to give you context as to how we are going in Australia, I suppose.
No, that's amazing. I think I wish our legislators and governors could learn something from whatever you guys are doing over there, because numbers here are at all-time highs and seem to be kind of spiking and making new highs every single day. But fortunate, like I'm safe, happy. I run a software company, so from a business perspective, we're doing better than we've ever done. So very, very fortunate and thankful for that. I originally stumbled on your podcast called the Hustle and Flow podcast by basically trying to do a little homework on whether there were other podcasts kind of like my own, right?
Right.
And before we started, I mentioned to you, I feel like we're doing slightly similar things. We try to strike this balance between kind of a philosophical take on mindfulness, but then also the practical kind of application of how it kind of shows up for people in their daily lives. And it seems like you guys are trying to do this balance between kind of hustle culture, but flow and presence as well. Would you say that's a good characterization?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned before we jumped on, it sort of happened by accident. This whole dynamic. Hustle and Flow, I co-host with a dear brother of mine. His name is Sean Cooper, and we've been friends for over a decade. And we've sort of, as people do, as individuals do, we all evolve over time. And we've worn different hats, and we've had vastly different dynamic of relationship throughout the years. But there was a time when our conversations started shifting, and it became more and more profound, and had more depth and more nuance and color to the conversation, outside of your general surface level chatter about sports and other profane things that we tend to deal with or tend to care about in modern society. And every time we'd have a coffee and we'd have a chat for like 2 or 3 hours, and we'd just say, we represent polar opposites of perspective, but we were always able to have these really nice conversations and meet in the middle somewhere, and sometimes even just agree to disagree. And then we'd just stop and say we should have recorded that. And we said that for about 6 to 12 months, and we finally started the podcast early this year. And yeah, it's been amazing, I guess, in terms of the guests we've been able to have on, and the conversations that we've been able to have with people from varying backgrounds and things like this. But yeah, absolutely. In terms of the philosophy of the podcast itself, it generally holds this very practical element of well-being and mindfulness and presence and all these sorts of things, and how it is applicable in the current world and our current circumstance.
Got it. Yeah, I think we'll probably dive into that a little bit more. Maybe just for selfish reasons, launching my own podcast. Definitely would love to kind of pick your brain on what you've learned thus far, and how you're kind of going about things. But if we kind of back up a little bit to, I think, a really interesting place to kick this off, in listening to a bunch of your episodes, in reading some of the content on your website. You talk a lot about a transformation or a transformative experience that you went through for a few years ago.
Mm.
And if we think about that experience as a turning point, so to speak, you might look at life as before and after that point. So I'd be curious to help people get some context on who you are, and where you come to the present moment from. How would you describe your life before that point? And you could take that in any direction, whether it's career, ambitions, goals, mindsets, whatever kind of feels like it's important to describe there.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I guess whenever I'm asked about my origin story, I take it literally to the beginning, and I think it's important to sort of paint the picture in this way. And just saying that, I was born and raised in Sydney, Australia, and I am first generation Australian-born Chinese. My parents immigrated from Hong Kong in the late 70s, early 80s, with that literal immigrant story, less than $100 in their pockets, and just trying to make a more, I guess, comfortable life for their children and their families. So when I was growing up, I grew up in areas where it was largely Caucasian Australian demographics. So that in itself was, I guess, one of the key elements to what painted most of my life up until the catalytic moment that you refer to, which I will talk to in a moment. But I didn't really feel like I had much of an identity, and I felt like I was out of place, and I felt that for most of my life. Going through school, again, the only Asian kid amongst all the Caucasian Australians. So I was the quote unquote token Asian. And obviously all that comes with the racial abuse and all that sort of thing that most people of my ethnicity would have experienced in Australia, especially in the 90s and the noughties. So there was that, and for me, that pushed me in a certain direction. All those things that sort of laid the foundation of the first almost 3 decades of my life in terms of what I wanted to be, or what I thought I wanted to be. It was all about attempting to fit in some context or regard. So if I look back, I've played many different roles, or worn different masks, or worn different hats throughout my life, and all of those identities lacked any essence. It was just simply an attempt to be recognized and fit into some, I guess, social context, whether that be, a nerd, an Asian nerd kid in school, or, hanging out with the cool kids or the cool clique in the school, the athletic basketball player in later high school years, or the guy that went into watching like Japanese anime, all these sorts of things, So I jumped around quite a bit, and that, fast forwarding a little bit in terms of like jumping into how that shaped my later years and my career and things like this, I pursued a role that would make my parents happy, and what I thought would, I guess, get some sort of mark of approval from them. So I jumped into the finance industry. It was one of those top 3 type roles that our sort of Asian parents would have liked us to do, whether it be a doctor or a lawyer, or working in banking or something like this. So I got a job in one of the Australia's biggest financial services corporation. And I worked there for 12 years, and I did really well. I made a very good living there, climbed up the ladder, and in a general context, I would have been very successful financially and in terms of the role that I held and the trajectory that I was heading on. But I guess to answer your question in terms of who I was back then, I was just whoever I thought people wanted me to be. And I always knew that there was something that was amiss. I can't really describe it. I've always been asked this question, and it's very hard for me to articulate into, something that is easily explainable and understood. But many people would understand that, or some sort of feeling or gut feeling or inkling that something is amiss in your life. And it really is up to us to really investigate that or ignore it, right? It's like, I like to refer to, the Matrix, when Morpheus basically says there's a splinter in your mind, but you don't know what it is. And that's exactly what I had, right? And I think that consciously I did make the decision back then to ignore it, because it was difficult to ask myself those questions and, sit in a quiet room and really inquire deep within myself. But I guess at the height of my career, in 2013, I just got the dream promotion. I just signed the papers on a property with my then girlfriend, now wife. So our first property together. So, everything was happening. And then not long after that, signing the papers, I was diagnosed with cancer. And this was completely out of the blue. Like, I was a healthy dude. Well, healthy enough, I would say. I did some dumb things back in the day, binge drinking and drugs and things like this. But that was a long time ago, before that happened, and I'd stopped all those things. But yeah, look, got diagnosed with cancer out of the blue. It was like a routine checkup. I just thought I needed to have a look at something. I just thought it was something minor, but it turned out to be cancer, which was quite a big shock. And, that's the catalytic moment I tell everyone about, that sort of changed my life, and for the better, of course. Like, I look at it always as a blessing in disguise. And yeah, I was thrust into 7 months of chemotherapy, radiotherapy. I wasn't able to work, of course, and I was just recovering and going through treatment, which was one of the toughest things I've ever done in my life, of course. But it was the thing that had to force me to change my perspective on life and look at things differently. Because, like I said, I was at least at some sort of understanding, whether it was intellectually or sensually or whatever it was. I knew something was up, or something was amiss in my life, but I just avoided it up until that point. And that was the sort of thing that pulled the rug from underneath my feet, to say that you better you better look at things a little bit differently and ask those questions. So yeah, that was me before cancer.
No, that's an amazing story, and thank you so much for sharing that level of detail. I can only imagine how difficult that would be. Thinking about that moment, so now you're in this place, in the midst of this diagnosis, and everything is different, right? Like the priority list, what's important, like all of that changes. So you said something a couple minutes ago, that the easy thing is to not confront things, right? And cancer is obviously something that you have to confront. If you don't, there's only kind of one way out of that, if you don't kind of confront that. So I'm curious, you were physically thrust with something that you had to confront, and I imagine that brought about things emotionally and psychologically that you had to confront. So what were the pieces, outside of the treatment and the chemo, that you had to treat the physical, disease, what were the things that mentally and emotionally and psychologically that came to the fore that you had previously been ignoring?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that anything came up immediately. It was definitely something that unraveled over time. The first 12 months post treatment and my road to recovery, so to speak, a lot of things sort of popped up. I'd always look, I described this job that I had, and I worked there for 12 years before I stopped. And I always had an inkling that I didn't want to be there. Like, it's not that I didn't do well. Like I said, I killed it, and I could have continued to rise up and make all the money that I wanted to, and get whatever role that I wanted to if I truly applied myself. But I didn't want to. There wasn't that burning desire within me. So firstly, those are like the sort of external situations that immediately sort of popped up for myself that obviously were the major factors in my life, or the major activities, or I guess just that the major like exercises that I did on a daily basis, like going to work every day. I was just like, I didn't enjoy that. And then that's just something that I sort of honored, that feeling of not enjoying whatever I was doing. Why am I doing something that I'm not enjoying? So, those are the sorts of very early surface level discussions that I was having with myself. Obviously, there were practical reasons while I was doing it. I just picked up a property, so I had to pay for that. So there wasn't any immediate ability for me to simply quit, and there was the other factor of not knowing what I actually wanted to do outside of what I was doing, right? So there was all these sort of questions that boiled up. And then, there was like relationship type questions as well, in terms of the types of people that I kept company with. Again, there was these things that I popped up. Like, I had friendship groups that I felt no longer served who I was. And it was not to say that they were bad people at all. And it's not to say that the relationship is negative or bad right now, right? It was just that I was changing as a person. I was realizing who I was, and I needed to make a decision and move on from those, like asking myself those questions. Why am I hanging out with these types of people when what their priorities are completely different to mine? These sorts of things. And they were the very early conversations I was having with myself that sort of led me down this rabbit hole, that really essentially blasted open the doors of my, lens of perception and changed how I view the world. So, yeah.
Something I think about on this topic a lot is the fact that when I was young, I think I was maybe 16 or 17. And when you're a 16 or 17-year-old guy, I mean, how you chase the girls and you want to go to the parties and you want to do all these things. I remember a friend of mine got in a very serious DUI, and one of the people in the car lost their lives. And that was a huge moment. Like, wore a seatbelt every single time I got into a car after that. Thinking about drinking and driving, like those moments that change perspective, right? And the reason I bring that up is, you were thrust into this situation, and then you start questioning your relationships and your career and these types of things. As someone now that tries to lead other people to mindfulness and builds a program for mindfulness, how do you talk to somebody that hasn't been staring life in the face or had one of these moments? Like, how do you help to wake people up to what is oftentimes, the walking dead, so to speak, through their lives? Like, what is that process for you like?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think look, like most people, it's been a huge learning journey for myself in terms of how I approach this topic. And, I've stumbled a lot because, like, as you can imagine, and anyone can imagine who's listening, like, once you stumble upon something that you personally feel has some sort of like magic affection, right? Something that will palpably change someone's life for the good. you want to shout it from the rooftops, right? And you want to make everyone else around you realize this. And like, I think that this sort of talks to this notion that I always have, is that your closest relationships are your greatest teachers in life, right? Because in saying this, my then girlfriend, now wife, she was someone that I always wanted to sort of drag along with me on this journey of self-discovery and individuation, right? And it caused a lot of friction between us, especially in the early years, just because I was trying to shove things down her throat, essentially, right? And now the way that I look at it now, and the way that I teach people, and the way that I talk about it, is that help is not an offer. Help is a request. And that talks to this, I guess, this notion, or the Zen notion, that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Like, you think about anyone else, yourself, you think about any individual, how difficult it is to change the way one sees the world, or even how one perceives something very minimal, or just change a belief system. And it is a difficult process. So if it's difficult to change it within yourself, then how hard would it be to change it within someone else, or promote that, right? It's really difficult. So I really honor that each time that I sort of speak with people. And it's not about preaching about one thing or another. I have a way of speaking, and I have a number of things that I ascribe to and disciplines that I follow, but they're all my own. They're adaptations from things that I've sort of studied throughout the years. And I try to teach through being a leader and a role model.
Mm.
I have to do it, and people have to see it. And this is how, my wife has sort of come around as well, in terms of like, and again, she takes her own time, and she has her own journey and her own pace, but she has changed, and I've seen it change, because she's seen, I guess, the way that I act and uphold myself. It's a I guess it's a model of sovereignty and integrity. You
Mm.
got to practice what you preach day in, day out, regardless of who's watching. And I think that's the best way to teach. When people see that you are practicing what you're preaching, and they can see the positive benefits from these things, then they will be naturally curious about it. And this is when, I guess, if you want to use an analogy of the Trojan horse, this is when you can enter into the sphere of the conversation and attempt to explain, or have simple discourse about it, to come to some sort of understanding, and appease that curiosity. So yeah, I think it's a interesting topic of conversation, and it's a delicate balancing act, as is everything in life.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's such an amazing point. So many people try to help or fix or what have you other people, and then there's this mountain of rubble kind of sitting behind their own home. And it's interesting how oftentimes people go down that path. So for you, I mean, clearly both of us place a high value on mindfulness, on meditation, on presence. Most people that I speak to about it come to it from very different places or experiences. So we talked a little bit about that catalytic moment, but where does mindfulness enter the picture for you? Is there you're sitting in a room and you see a brochure? Is there somebody that suggests something? What was kind of step one on your journey of mindfulness?
Yeah. So I guess I've always been someone, like, when I reflect back now, I've always been someone who has been very curious about things and questioned everything, right? So I
Mm.
feel like it's sort of something that I've grown up with, some sort of mode of seeing things a little bit differently. I've
Mm.
always been able to like read patterns, and just be more inquisitive about things, and not just take things at face value. So I guess I don't know where that was, like, where I inherited that from, but I always felt like I had some sense of what mindfulness was. Not some intellectual understanding, but I just had some sense of what it was growing up. And the funny thing was, I guess I've never really meditated before. I guess up until I had cancer, as a young man who was going through a cancer treatment, I was, I think, 27 or 28 at the time. They appointed me a psychologist who recommended meditation as a means to, I guess, deal with the stress and anxiety of the circumstances I was going through. And I started and I tried many different avenues of meditation, just through the apps that are out there and all these sorts of things. And I'd love to just make it make people aware that the fact is I didn't just pick up meditation from then on and I ran with it. It took me 12 to 18 months of on and off sort of practice before I cultivated a daily practice and ritual of meditating and beginning to start seeing the transformational effects it had on me. So it took a long time, but yeah, that was the origins of, when I started actually consciously practicing, meditation and mindfulness, I suppose.
No, that's interesting. I'd love to peel back the onion on this one, because I was chatting with a friend a few weeks ago, and he trains physically a lot, and he, as somebody who trains physically, if you've ever known anybody, and perhaps Sean, I don't know, but if anybody has competed in like a bodybuilding competition, part of it is the strength, the actual physical strength, but a lot of it is aesthetics as well, right? There's a lot of tanning and oils and angle. There's a lot of aesthetic to that field. And the reason I bring this up is because meditation is completely the opposite. It's all inner work, right? It's not, you go to the gym and a month later, you've lost a few pounds and you can take your progress picture in the gym, right? It's a little bit of a different experience. And you can, the benefits and effects are palpable and tangible. But for me personally, when I started a daily practice, I would say it wasn't until maybe week 2 or week 3 where it started to feel really, really tangible. And then maybe month 2 or 3 where I would bring presence to just experiences, kind of walking around on the street or having a conversation, and feeling the physical sensation of anger and stress start to appear, and understanding what those things feel like. So I'd love to maybe understand your experience, that 12 to 18 month journey. Like, what were you actually practically doing, and how long, what were the signs internally for you that things were starting to have an impact on your life?
Yeah. And it's a great sort of analogy or to contextualize the two very big differences, right? And like, I understand completely, because before I was hit with, I guess, the cancer, I was probably like 10 to 12 kilograms heavier than I am now of lean mass, because, Sean and I, we used to hang out in the gym 5-6 days a week. That was our thing. It was one of the masks that I wore in terms of wanting to be that big buff dude. And, everyone goes through that, I suppose, at some point in their life. But yeah, very different to how you can pick it up. But like, I think I've mentioned this a few times before already in this short conversation, and you start to pick up some threads as to what's so important to me. Is not so much like, intellectual understanding, but, that sensual, visceral feeling that you get through various things. The way that I would describe it, and the easiest way to make it relative to your audience, is think about like a song that you really love to listen to, right? And you've got like your favorite headphones on, and you're listening to the song, and you're not even like actively listening, but you can feel something just shooting through your body, some of the sensations that are just vibrating through your whole body. That's telling you something about who you innately are, right? And it's like speaking to you in a different way that's not, through the conventional means of conversation or communication, which is, language and words. So that's really important when you're thinking about in terms of like how you can connect with the meditative practice and become more mindful, is that when I first started, it was all about instruction and following instruction, all these guided meditations that are out there. And they're very helpful for us to start in terms of telling us how we're supposed to be breathing or sitting and what we're supposed to be feeling, the different sensations in the different parts of our bodies. That's bringing attention to it. But it really clicks when you simply feel it and you feel some sort of difference. And it's not supposed to be some sort of life-changing moment of enlightenment, right? It's not about that at all. Like enlightenment is a moment by moment thing. You can be enlightened one moment and then completely unenlightened the next moment, right? So this is why it's important to practice and see it as a continual practice, a practice of life, right? Like enlightenment is not a place to be reached. It is continual steps on the journey of life. And like I said, after practicing and just sitting there with his earphones on and just sort of closing my eyes and just going through the motions and going through these 5-minute, 10-minute sort of guided meditations and going, okay, I've done it. It's a tick box exercise. I've ticked it off my list for today and I'm going to go on my day. At the very beginning, when I was doing that, I guess, it was easy for me to just say, to dismiss it and just say, oh, whatever, it's not really something that I'm feeling or seeing any tangible results as people describe it. So I would miss days and all these sorts of things. Then I would have like little hiatuses and then come back to it. But then, like I said, once I started becoming a bit more consistent, I started to recognize these sensations that were going through my body as I was becoming more centered and I was dropping out of my intellectual mind and really falling into my body. And again, with my curious way of digging into things, I wanted to delve deeper into those feelings. I wanted to hold those feelings in my body. I wanted to realize when they come up. I wanted to realize how they come up and why they come up. And I wanted to see if I can hold and expand them. And this is really the philosophy of finding space. This is how I describe it. Everyone's quote unquote space feels a little bit different, but it's important to find your own and really honor that and sit within that and expand that and allow that to be this inner peace within you that you can hold, in every moment of your life.
I would absolutely love that. And, I think, it's a perfect segue into the business that you're building. So you just mentioned kind of one of the core ideas, but if you meet somebody at a networking event or something, and they're like, hey, what do you do? What is your response to, the description of finding space and, practically, like, what is the experience like for somebody that's wanting to explore it?
Yeah. Whenever I'm asked, I like, to be very frank with you, I hate that question. I hate being asked that question, what do you do? Because again, it's one of these things, it really doesn't, for me, I don't even like calling finding space a business, because the word business in the traditional context has these associations with offering a product and for the exchange of wealth and things like this. The way that I would describe finding space, right, it really is just like a physical manifestation of the practice and who I am as a person. I feel like it's a reflection of who I am inside. And like, I like to tell the story of how this came about. And I know that you'll resonate with this in terms of how it came about and the different, I guess, concepts or different points that would sort of pull this picture together. Because like, when you're going through this journey of self-discovery and inquiry, you'll begin to like pick things up through your mindfulness practice, and they may not mean anything in particular. Go back to the example that I gave in terms of the music, right? You pick things up and you're saying, oh, okay, that's a random puzzle piece over here, and then there's another random puzzle piece over there, And over time, you've got like a bunch of all these puzzle pieces that don't even make any semblance of a picture, but you just have them. But in 2019, early 2019, I spent some time in a Zen Buddhist monastery. I lived there for 15 days in Japan, in the southern island of Japan, you know, away from Tokyo and all these sorts of things, in a remote fishing village. And I was just called there because, you know, I have some sort of connection with the Japanese culture that runs quite deep, that I feel. So I stayed there, and on the second day of being there, you know, I remember vividly this experience for myself, where I was with the monk on the way back from a trip to the local store to do some errands with him. And like I said, it was on a remote fishing village, so it was a coastal type area. And we were driving back on this coastal road, and I was just looking out, and just 2 days being away from, you know, modern society, I started to feel this feeling of timelessness. You know, I didn't know what time it was, I didn't know what day it was, and everything just melted away, right? And I had this very lightness of who I was and what I was doing there. Everything was just very light, and it felt like everything in my life, apart from a handful of people who I deeply have a deep connection with, are very important to me, and the work that I was doing, you know, the inner work that I was doing, those were the only two things that were real in my life. Everything else, it felt like a dream, you know, my job, my house, you know, even some of my family, the money that I had, my life up until that point, it felt like a dream. It didn't feel real. And that's when finding space came to be, you know, that's when the whole concept of finding space came to be. This is what I wanted to, you know, cultivate and continue to hold and strengthen and, you know, I guess, be able to share with the world on a continual basis. And that's what finding space is about. You know, it's not about selling stuff. You know, I do sell stuff on there, but, you know, it's for me to continue to grow and evolve, and to then offer my knowledge and wisdom through my practice into the world. And if people resonate with that, then that's awesome. But if they don't, that's awesome as well. You can find your own medicine. But yeah, that's really what finding space is about for me.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because as a quote unquote entrepreneur, right, building a business, we're building a software company. You know, it's interesting. So maybe here's a different way to think about it. When you buy a car, you don't really ask them what material the seatbelt is made out of, right? Like safety is just something that's built into the car, right? And you think about something like a Tesla. I don't think people buy Tesla because it's eco-friendly. They buy Teslas because they're cool and they're a status symbol, and it's FOMO and the fitting in and the everything that comes with buying a Tesla. And then it happens to be eco-friendly, which is great. And I guess I bring that up because I think about your quote unquote business. We don't like to think of it that way, but you know, there is an entity that needs to be registered, and then revenue and these types of things. But what you just described is just a way of existing, or a way of being, and hopefully that creates some draft that other people will kind of benefit from. And you know, I think about our business in a very similar way. We build this software that helps people simplify and organize their lives on the internet. But the idea is that, you know, if you can be more intentional with the time that you spend online, you should be intentional with the people that you surround yourself with, and the places that you go, and where you live, and how you spend your time more broadly. And you know, when we got on before pressing record, I described kind of pausing the thought process around like marketing and investors and raising money and all of these things, and just really try to get much closer to just thinking about my own intentionality. And this podcast and speaking with people like you, I think are a perfect excuse for me to just learn and practice, and hopefully some other folks can hear that and benefit and take from it what they will. But you said it much more eloquently than I did, so I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I want to make it clear to everyone, like, and this talks to the point to what you mentioned before in terms of like this practical philosophy and practical element of how we think and how we approach things. It's don't get it twisted in terms of like me being this noble dude that's high above everyone else who doesn't accept any money and all these sorts of things. I still need to live. I still have, I live in both worlds, and I'm very conscious of that. But it's the thing is that is different from me, and that's why I don't like to call it business, and I don't operate in conventional business ways. Is that my priorities for finding space is not about making money. It is a byproduct of what I do, and that is expressing my truth, right? My belief is that if I express my truth through this vehicle of finding space, which just manifests out of thin air, in that moment that I described before in Japan, in that Zen Buddhist monastery, right? Then that's it. That's what I need to pursue, right? And it is through the guise of a business, because that's what it works in the current context of the modern world. And like I said, I don't operate in the same ways. I don't really market in the conventional sense, because I don't believe in that. Because again, it has some sort of connotations behind it, pertaining to things like manipulation and all these sorts of things. I don't do that, and it's counterintuitive to everything that I've talked about to this point, in terms of help being a request and not an offer, right? So my belief is that, look, at the end of the day, I will just continue to express my truth through whatever mediums I feel are best. I have a podcast, as everyone knows. I'm writing a book, all these sorts of things. And I offer mentorship, I offer meditation programs. And if people resonate with that, they can come and say good day and, connect with me. But if they don't, that's cool. Like, find whatever medium it is. But there's like this huge difference. Like, after leaving the corporate world, I really, and giving up a six-figure salary and things like this, and now I'm making like peanuts in comparison. But look, like, there is a very big difference in terms of like what you need to survive, quote unquote survive in the modern world, versus like upholding this grand lifestyle. I just dropped all that shit, and that, plain and simple. And yeah. I'm living a very minimalist life, which I love. I truly love minimalism in all respects. Like, it just speaks to me in so many different ways. Yeah. And like, that's me, right? That is me. But the point I'm trying to make is that it can be done. You don't need exorbitant amounts of money. Needs are very different to wants, and I'm able to sort of chip that back over many, many, many years of delayering and unlearning. But it can be done. It can be done.
Yeah, most definitely. I just went back a few weeks ago and reread a book called Walden by Henry David Thoreau. And, he goes and lives in this cabin by the woods, and he does this kind of full accounting of, his expenditures and what he needs. And he realizes that, quote unquote, working one day a week is all he needs to do. Right. So he just will go to one of the adjacent farms and help kind of, pick some of the fruits or vegetables for one day a week. And that's all he needs to sustain the life that he lives kind of in the cabin. He builds the cabin by cutting down a few trees. And it's just a beautiful example of exactly what you just described. So, Leslie, you've been incredibly generous with your time. I think that people will take immense amounts from what you have to offer. If people want to learn a little bit more about finding space and kind of what you bring to the world, where can they find you?
Yeah, man. Thanks. Firstly, I just want to say thanks for the invite again. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. And again, like it's been not going to be the last time for sure. Like we'll be connected, and as I said, it's been a pleasure to be here and speak to you and your audience. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity. If people want to find out more about me or Finding Space, just jump on my website, findingspace.co. That's findingspace.co. And, through Facebook and Instagram as well, it's the same handle. It's at findingspace.co. So you can reach me through all those channels. And if there's anything that you want to get in touch with me, then just say today and send me a message through any of those mediums.
Awesome. That sounds like a plan. I'll make sure that we include those in the show notes and look forward to connecting again in the future.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Me too.
Cheers. Have a good one.
See ya.